the community there is just incredibly plugged in. It's just the community in the villages around Kennewick. So I was there for 2 years, and in the spring of 2008, God called me back, and it was not an easy decision, but I've been grateful to be here and have the past few years with my family. I didn't quite understand it at the time. I felt like I finally found a place where I fit and where I belonged and where I had a role, and they still needed a teacher. They still need a teacher, in fact. But God called me back to the United States and back to Kentucky, where I had gone to school. And I've been here for the past 4 years teaching at a Christian school in Lexington. But about a year and a half ago, God started stirring my heart again towards Kenya. And I've been hoping and praying that He would do that for many years. Since I stepped off the plane in Atlanta, I wanted to go back. And so God has finally opened the doors, and I'm headed back. My goal is to be there by January of 2013. And so my challenge to you tonight, before we go into our question and answer time, if you have more questions about what I do, my challenge to you tonight is to look around you. There are many people in ministry in your communities, not just overseas in my ministry, but all around us, who are struggling to carry the mats of ministry, who need partners to come alongside them, both in finances and talents and in gifts. And there are many things that we can do to help those in ministry around us carry their mats. And so that's my challenge to you today. So, do you have any questions?
I know some of the missionaries, like the Bagley in South Africa, was talking about the Muslim influence in the area you're in, I guess, with Kenya are going to be. How much of that do you see there, or like what part of the population?
Kenya is a very, very diverse country, and so they actually claim to be 97% Christian, which doesn't really mean a whole lot. It doesn't necessarily mean 97%, born-again believers. It means 97% saw the census and said Christian or Muslim, and they said, well, I'm not Muslim, and so they checked Christian. But there is a growing Muslim influence, especially in Nairobi, and along the coast of Kenya is heavily Muslim. It's growing a little bit, but Kenya is very much fighting back against it. There's a large influence from the Somali pirates that have come in because they don't want to live in Somalia. I'm sure you all have seen that in the news, where they've captured ships. And the people who have gotten that money, nobody wants to live in Somalia. It's a pretty awful place. There's no infrastructure. There's nothing there. And so they're moving into Kenya. And so there's kind of a fight back against the Muslim influence a little bit. But again, I haven't been there in 4 years. Excuse me. And so that's my general observations from afar and from what I've heard. So.
What kind of government is in Kenya?
Kenya has a democracy. Back in 2008, my last 6 months there was a lot of election violence around the elections. But there will be an election this coming March, and we're hoping that it will be more peaceful than it was the first time.
I've been reading in the USA Today about some of the changes that you're talking about. It sounds to me it's not as Christian friendly as it once was, I guess, because of the Muslim you were just talking about. There's a great concern there, and when I read that, because I always thought that Kenya was pretty friendly to people coming in, and even like yourself. How close to the part of the city is this hospital?
Kennewick is actually 3.5 hours outside of Nairobi. It's a very, very rural area.
That might be to its advantage.
Very much so. Nairobi's not it's, even at the best of times, it's pretty crime-ridden. There are barbed wire fences and tall fences around pretty much everything. It's a tough place to live in. So thankfully, we don't live in that kind of environment. Where we live is very open to the gospel and very friendly towards us. They recognize the value of having a hospital there that not only provides medical care but also jobs for several hundred Kenyans in the community.
What's your housing?
There are, where I will be living is an apartment. There are a lot of people in the community that live in mud huts, the kind of picturesque things that you see, but we have more permanent housing around the hospital for employees and for missionaries who live there.
Is that on the hospital grounds, or is
yes, it's actually what the hospital owns, but there's a hospital with a fenced-in area, and then the homes are kind of down the hill around it. If that makes sense.
You mentioned a while ago your dad knows the hospital. I don't know your dad's age, but I was wondering what you thought about maybe if Dad should retire, he's going back to the hospital and together you could work together at that place. Is that a possibility?
Well, my dad's actually, he's not a doctor, he's actually a writer.
But I'm saying, you said he knew the hospital
He
and
knew the
recommended the hospital. And he must have had some direct contact with the hospital, which means maybe he's still interested in it. And if it's a place where he could fit in, it could be a family thing instead of, I mean, it's wonderful you're there.
Yeah.
But I just wondered, has that been explored?
No, I don't think, I think that would be wonderful. I would, you know, it's kind of my dream to be able to be in Kenya and live near family. It's every missionary's dream, to have your family on the mission field with you, but I don't think it's very likely.
I pray about that, because if Dad was interested once, he probably still is very interested, particularly with your being there.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'll mention that to him.
Yes.
We'll see what he says. Are there any other questions about anything?
I do remember my first year of teaching, by the way.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand. I apologize.
It's one of those unforgettable things.
Yes.
I'm curious about the students you teach as far as what their needs are and what kind of situations, what kind of needs they have.
Just in terms of their educational needs, it's, I guess I've forgotten that, that section. It's a one-room schoolhouse. We work with a bunch of different ages. We try to pick the largest age group. And this, when I was there the first time, it was a second, third grade group. That was the largest age group. And so we focused on them, and we did a regular school day with them. I guess I can step back here where the microphone is. We did a regular school day with them. In the mornings, math and science and language arts, just a very typical American elementary school classroom. And then in the afternoons, we did supplemental things. The middle schoolers and the younger elementary, the preschoolers, did most of their work at home with the moms. But they came to me in the afternoons for things like art and PE. I did middle school science one year, a couple different levels, art and PE, creative writing, and that kind of thing.
Do you have special needs students?
Not particularly. I have a couple of different kids that have ADHD and that kind of, we have a couple of kids who are OCD diagnosed and ADHD, but nothing more than that.
What language do you teach in?
I teach in English. There are actually, Kenyan kids actually speak 3 languages. They speak a tribal language. Around us it's Kipsigis. And they also speak the national language, which is Kiswahili, which I will be learning when I go back. And I'm really excited about that because I didn't learn it very much when I was there before. And they also, and they teach English in the schools. And so anybody you meet under the age of 30 will know English pretty much, even in the rural areas, because they've learned it in the schools, which is a wonderful thing. Their English is far better than my Swahili will ever be.
Are the parents, I mean, are the parents that are, the children that have parents, are they pretty involved in the school? Or are they just, they stand at a distance?
The children I teach, it's a homeschool co-op kind of situation. I work right with the parents and we talk about what they want their kids to learn. They're very involved. We have a meeting at the end of every year to look at what classes we need to teach the next year, and they talk about what they want their kids to learn and how their kids learn, and we pick curriculum that fits that. And it's, in my opinion, I think it's pure education. I think it's about as pure as you get. There's nobody else saying this is what your kids should learn. It's the parents who are making the choices, and I love that.
Now, is there any, I know it's Christian-based, but is there any, like, evolution to creation, like, mishaps over there? Like, I know over here there's the fight between evolution and creation, but I didn't know if that's even a thing over there.
In Kenya, in Kenyan schools, I don't think they get into that at all. Because it's, at least where we are, it's very strongly Christian. I think they would just teach creation. Excuse me, I'm grabbing a drink of water. In my middle school science classes,